Guten Tag. I'd like to dedicate this shiur tonight for a refuah shlema for Sarah Bea Ida Bas Tikva, Sarah Lamel. As an exception, I would like to ask you to join me in saying a capital Tehillim for her. Apparently, her condition has had its ups and downs. So if you can join me in saying, we'll say capital Chof, and then we'll put in some tzedakah. I know it's by night, and but it's a special situation. So if you join me, capital Chof, Lam Natziach Mizmil David, Ya'ancho Adonai B'yom Sara, Yisagevcho Shem Elihei Yaakov, Yishlach Ezracha Mikodesh, Umitzion Yisadecha, Yizker Kol Min Chisecha, Ve'iloscha Yadash Neselo, Yiten Lecho Chilvavecha, V'chol Atzoscha Yemale, Neranano B'Yishuasecha, V'Shem Eliheinu Nidgel, Yemale Adonai Kol Mish'ale Secha. Ath Yodati Ki Yishia Adonai Meshichoi, Ya'anehu Mishmei Kodshoi, V'Gvures Yeshi Yeminoi, Eila Varechev, V'Eila Vasusim, V'Anachnu V'Shem Adonai Eliheinu Nazkir, He Makaru V'Nafolo, V'Anachnu Kamnu V'Nis V'Idod, Adonai Hishia HaMelech Ya'aneinu V'Yem Koreinu. Shaberch Avram, Avisein Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, Aaron and David Shlem Hirape, S. Sorve Ida, Bas Tikva, Bavosh, Anu Mispalul, Bavuro, Nestim Socha, Bavuro, Bischase, Kodshboch, Yimole, Rachim Oleho, Achlim Ala Peso, Lachzika Lach Yeso, Yishlach Lo Meher, Refuah Shleiman Hashemayim, Lachol Berea Begideho, Sech Sharchel Yisrael, Refuah Sanefesh, Refuah Saguf, Benoimar Amen. Something in the stalker, and we'll start the shiur. So, perhaps very appropriately, we start off with the inyan of Tefiloh. And my question here is, no one asked me this question, it was something that was bothering me myself, about do B'nai Noach have the koyach of Tefiloh? So, I'm comparing here Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard Ari. So we in Nusach Arizal we finish off the bracha ki ato shemea tefilas kol peh. Nusach Ashkenaz finish off the penultimate part of the bracha ki ato shemea tefilas amcho Yisrael barachamim. So here they have the Nusach Ashkenaz is that Hashem listens to the tefillah of Eden with compassion, whereas Nusach Sfard says Hashem listens to the prayers of kol poa, every mouth. It would suggest that there's a difference here whether Hashem listens to the tefillahs of B'nai Noach or not. Ironically, or perhaps revealingly, when we look at the Aneinu, which is said on the fast day, so dafka in Nusach Sfard or Nusach Ra'uzal, we finish off Ha'oine la'amo Yisrael be'ez tzara, whereas in Nusach Ashkenaz it is Ha'oine be'ez tzara. So if you wanted to say that there is an emphasis dafka in Nusach Ashkenaz, dafka Hashem listens to the tefillah of Amcho Yisrael, well, actually on Atanis their Nusach is Ha'oine be'ez tzara without specifying B'nai Yisrael, and by us it's the other fakert that on Tanis we say Ha'oine lam Yisrael be'ez tzara. So I suspect that one should not be reading into this one position or the other. The Meforshei Hasidur do refer to the posuk in Tehillim Samach Hey. Tefiloh, he who listens to prayer, Odecha kol bosa yovoyu. To you all flesh do turn, will come to. Well, without going into the Meforshim Remozim, but that's Bepashtas kol bosa means all flesh or all humans, at least. Will turn to Hashem and Hashem will listen, obviously. Just in reference to the Nusach Ashkenaz, I want to perhaps remind you, we had this discussion where we say in the bracha of Refaenu, Roifei Choyle Ama Yisrael, and in the bracha of Asher Yotzar, we say Roifei Chol Basar. And if I remember correctly, back then the answer was that in Birchas Asher Yotzar is a shevach, it's a praise. Therefore, we emphasize Roifei Chol Basar. In Shemona Esrei, it is a request, and specifically because some have got the minhag of when they're asking for a prayer for someone specifically, they will spell out that name in the Rov of Anash. And since there is the idea of shiur Yisrael, when you ask for a refuah for someone, you should include amongst shiur Yisrael. Therefore, it finishes off Rov of Yisrael. On a request, it makes sense. Coming back to our point, it makes sense in a request. You a request for those who are close to you. But this doesn't really say one way or the other, but how do you say, with definition, whether the Eibishter listens to the Tefilos of Bnei Noach. But I was very curious. It was bothering me for the past week and a half or something. So I did some homework, and I came up with I'll tell you where I looked. I looked up. There's a sefer called Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. I think that's what it's called. Sheva Mitzvahs Hashem. Sorry, Sheva Mitzvahs Hashem. It's about the mitzvahs of Bnei Noach. And somewhere near the beginning of the sefer, talks about this question: do goyim have the mitzvah of tefillah? Do they have the power of tefillah? And this is how I got these references. So it became very, very interesting to me when I saw the details of the questions. So one is about Menashe Klein, who's a posuk in Borough Park, and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who posuk, he lived in Lower East Side in Manhattan, posuk, more prominent posuk in America. And they were asked, you can see here, Rav Klein was asked about the tefillah for public schools. Should there be activism for prayer in public schools? Now, for us, we remember very much how the Rebbe was so outspoken about the idea of having a moment of silence. Now, a moment of silence was for reflection. Was it for a moment of prayer? I don't know. I didn't manage to research that far. But meanwhile, Rav Klein in his tshuva, he takes the view that a Ben Noach does not have the power of tefillah at all, other than through the Beis Hamikdash. So you have Shlomo HaMelech, when he builds the Beis Hamikdash, when he dedicates the Beis Hamikdash, the Melochim Aleph chapter Ches, he asked that this place should be a venue where someone will pray and it will be heard. And then he says specifically, V'la Nochri, that the Nochri who comes here and will pray, you should listen to his prayer. So he says that's when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash. And when it says the Kibesi Beis Tefiloh Yikori L'chol Ha'amim, again through the Beis Hamikdash. When you see that Hogor was answered for the prayer when Shmuel was ill and dying of thirst, etc. So he says that was B'schus Avraham. He takes this very interesting view that the power of tefillah is not given to Bnei Noach. Perhaps he means Dafka Oved Avodah Zarah, I don't know. The other, so that's in Tofshin Nun Vav. Then we have here in Tofshin Chof Gimel, and this letter is written by Rav Moshe Feinstein to Reb Sholem Rivkin. For those who are not familiar, there was a chassid of the Rebbe Rashab called Reb Beryl Rivkin, and he lived on Eastern Parkway. He would come to the Rebbe's Farbrengen, etc. One of the prominent chassidim in his time, and he had a son called Sholem Rivkin, Reb Sholem, who was a Rav in Seattle, later in St. Louis, Missouri, and he had written to Rav Moshe asking about whether there should be the union of promoting tefillah for Umm for Bnei Noach. I'm pointing this out because I'm suspecting that this is coming from a Lubavitch. The question of Sholem Rivkin was not just on his own, but coming from a Lubavitch background. And Reb Moshe takes the view just the opposite of Rav Klein. And he says absolutely that there is an inyan of mitzvah of tefillah, not the inyan of tefillah every day. We don't mean here a formal tefillah, Shemona Esrei. We don't mean that. As we know, anyone who's learned tefillah knows that there is a debate whether praying on a daily basis is a mitzvah min haTorah or not. But praying, everyone agrees that when there is a prayer for a person is an eis tzara, who is in a predicament, to daven to Hashem to relieve him from his predicament, that is definitely a mitzvah for Yidden. And Reb Moshe says it applies to Goyim also, applies to Bnei Noach also. And if I'm not mistaken, he even uses language of Ikrei Emunah. And I feel very, very strongly, Reb Moshe's position I resonate with very, very much, because what a Goy is forbidden to worship Avodah Zarah. What does that mean, to worship? Worship means he's turning to this deity and asking for blessing, for parnasa, for rains, a good harvest, whatever it may be. So he is praying for his, and we're saying to him, you mustn't worship. Worship means prayer. So you mustn't worship Avodah Zarah. So what then? He should be worshiping Hashem. So what does worship mean? It means that you recognize Hashem as the deity, as the power, and therefore when you need intervention, you need help, so then you're going to turn to that deity and you are going to ask for help. I just see that inyan of prayer is a automatic result. If there's a mitzvah of recognition of Hashem as the power, it goes automatically the inyan of prayer. So you might say, I'm not so, you might challenge that. All right, and especially you see Rav Klein didn't learn that way. But I did a little bit of research to see, does the Rebbe say something? So what I have here is from Tov Shin Mem Hey, and this is when the Rebbe promotes the inyan of, this is a siyum, the first, I think was the first siyum of the first cycle of Limud Rambam as the Rebbe had instituted. And the Rebbe wanted that there should be a celebration also in the birthplace of the Rambam, in Fez, in Morocco, and he's recommending that there should be Torah, Tefiloh, and Tzedakah. Now, the background to this whole story is that the Moroccan government, they had started making a whole campaign in commemoration of the Rambam. And that's what, even before the Rebbe started the whole campaign, there was already, the government of Morocco had started promoting it. And so now the Rebbe is saying that along with the government in Morocco, they should be making a Torah, Tefiloh, and Tzedakah. Now let's read carefully what the Rebbe says here. But these three inyonim of Torah, Avodah, Milchas Sodim are relevant also for Ummos Ha'olam. Kedivrei HaGemara. So you first have a Gemara which says if a Akum or Goy, whatever the words are in the Gemara, we don't know, the censor. But if a Goy is Oisik b'Torah, which Torah? Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. If he's learning Torah, Harehu k'kohen gadol. This is based upon a posuk. Yekoro hi mi pninim. That Torah is more precious than pninim, which comes from the word pearl, means a pearl, which is inside the oyster shell. Yekoro hi mi pninim. That the Torah is more precious than the kohen gadol who enters lifnai v'lifnim, who enters to the inner sanctuary. So it says even Akum was Oisik b'Torah. But the main point which I want to share with you is this second point. Tefiloh, says the Rebbe, and part of the column of Avodah, since a Goy is commanded to deny Avodah Zarah, since he is commanded to have emunah, faith in Hashem, even though, in the brackets, even though the faith of the Goy is on the level of Mamalik Almin, not higher, as discussed in Chassidus and Rosh HaPesach. So if he's aware that there is a supreme power, Koyach Elyon, and that this Koyach Elyon is Elyon al Kol Ha'oretz, that this is the supreme power over the entire universe, moving. It's obvious. It makes sense that when he finds himself in an ace sorrow, in a predicament, or when he is in need for a particular inyan, so he davens to that power, to the motzidishan shematzi komnimso. So he will pray to that first primary existence, which is the call of all existence. So if you have believed that he's there, so then when you have a need, you'll return to that being to ask him to fulfill to provide your needs. So the Rebbe clearly is saying that you're not saying there's a mitzvah of tefillah, but the concept of tefillah applies to Bnei Noach definitely. There are statistics. I did a little Google search on Thursday because just during the week. I remember reading a statistic of people being prayed for have got a greater recovery rate. But actually, as I Googled it on during the week, I saw that there are, we're not going to base our emunah in koyach hatfilah on statistics, but just we see here in Torah that there is a recognition that Omos Ha'olam also have the inyan of tefillah. Reb Naftali is writing here that the Rebbe earlier wanted that the public school children should pray. This was in the 20s when the regent's prayer was abolished, and the Rebbe protested strongly. So that's obviously the conversation, the correspondence of Rav Rivkin in Tovshin Chav Gimel with Reb Moshe. That was obviously a relation to the abolishment of the regent's prayer and the Rebbe's protest. I'm guessing. I think it's a korev le'emes. And then in the 80s, in the mems, that's when the Rebbe started pushing the moment of silence. But yes, so I think what you're saying, that the moment of silence was a kind of replacement for the prayer, but it wasn't just a moment of reflection, but also to daven what they need. I don't know. Yes, thank you, Rabbi Glasman in Riga. It went through my mind also. The shluchim in Toronto, I'm not sure whether it was Toronto or was it shluchim in Canada, you're writing, that they had a meeting with the then Prime Minister of Canada, and they wanted to present perhaps a silver. They wanted to get a valuable item like a silver cup or something, and the Rebbe told them, "What's he going to do with it?" And the Rebbe told them to give a siddur, and they got that was just when as far as I remember, it was just when the Tilas Hashem in 1978, when the Tilas Hashem came out with the English translation, and they went and got a copy leather bound, and they presented that to the then Prime Minister, whether it was Trudeau or whoever it was, I don't remember. Thank you. Yeah, well, that went through my mind that everybody was saying that there's a Vod Mile in Goya has a union of tefillah. Thank you. Let's move on then. Let's go on to the next question. This is on a much simpler level. Someone's asking me, he's noticed in some shuls, perhaps Chabad houses, that at Hagboho, they're singing also the posuk Hashiveinu, and he's asking, where does that come from? So I've got here on the screen our nusach of what we say by Hagboho. And then here, then we have what nusach Ashkenaz. This I took from Sidur, authentic Avodas Yisrael, the Ber Sidur. It's pretty much the same thing. Then when the Sefer Torah is put back in the Oron, then we just say Halocho. Nusach Ashkenaz has a whole list of psukim, and the last of them is after Drochei Adar, Eitz Chaim, Drochei Adar Cheinoyam. So they say the same psukim at Hagboho and at putting back the Sefer Torah, finishing off with Hashiveinu. What I suspect is just a simple, perhaps an error. What's been happening is you have in your Chabad house, you sing the Zosar Torah, and you start thinking, Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim bo. And the people recognize those words because they have that song which they sing when they do putting back the Sefer Torah. And since there it ends up with Hashiveinu, then it's also kind of kind of followed on that by Hagboho also to say Hashiveinu, but it doesn't belong there. Why does Hashiveinu belong when putting back the Sefer Torah? That's also a little bit tenuous, but there you can understand that Hashiveinu, we're putting back the Sefer Torah in the Oron. We're restoring the Sefer Torah to the Oron, to the Holy Ark, and we're saying a posuk, Hashem should bring us back to Him. So there's a kind of a symbolic relationship here, that just like we're putting back the Sefer Torah in the Oron, and we're asking Hashem also to take us close back to Him and rejuvenate, give us a fresh chayas, something on those lines. But I think it's just a simple mistake. Let's move on to number 3. I don't know why it's number 4 over here, but fine. So here I got last week, at the end of Shabbos, last week I actually took my phone with me to shul before Shabbos, and I switched it on right Motzei Shabbos, and I have here a question that an unidentified fellow writes to me that it was on Shabbos, they lifted the lid of the Cholent and they put it back. And they knew that that was the wrong thing to do. And therefore, they had been violated Shabbos by lifting the lid and putting it back. As a result, if you cook something on Shabbos, you're not allowed to eat it on Shabbos. So they didn't eat the Cholent on Shabbos. Now it's Motzei Shabbos. They want to know whether they have to wait also bechdei shi'ashu, that if you, the halacha is, if you ask a goy to do something in violation of the halacha, so then you're not allowed to benefit from that work, the effort of the goy, and you have to wait another specific amount of time, the amount of time it would have taken to do so, to prepare that. That's called bechdei shi'ashu. So they obviously, this was the question. They were halaching for the Cholent, and it was till Motzei Shabbos, and right away they wanted to know whether the Cholent. I told them you can have the Cholent now. There's the din of waiting bechdei shi'ashu is only said by if you ask a goy, because there is a greater temptation to ask a goy to do something without proper license. Therefore, there's a penalty that you wait. Not penalty, but the idea, the precaution that you wait. The amount of time you could have thought you gained, you don't gain. But we don't worry, we're not concerned that a Yid will do an Avera himself. And therefore there's no need to put in this bechdei shi'ashu. But are you allowed to lift? Did they actually violate Shabbos? So what you have on the screen is from the Sefer Sosa Shulchan from Reb Chaim Noah. Kosa b'Sefer Shvisas HaShabbos is an earlier Litvish Sefer, that you're not allowed to cover a pot which is sitting on the fire, even if the food is fully cooked, because putting the lid on is a form of stirring. There is a din of megis, you're not allowed to stir food. Now, if the food is not fully cooked, so stirring as you're making a soup or whatever it may be, you stir the food, and that is so that there should be rotation. And the food should be equally exposed to the heat at the bottom of the pot, and it also may perhaps help break things down to cook better. So stirring is part of the cooking process. So if it's not fully cooked, definitely stirring is forbidden. Then there is, as we know, sometimes if the food is bubbling, you put a lid on, it makes the bubbling much more active, and therefore it does move the food around. So putting a lid on is a form of stirring. So this Sefer Shvisas HaShabbos is saying, not only when it's not fully cooked, but even if it's fully cooked, also you mustn't put the lid on. And I suspect that is the general minhag. If you take off the cholent to the soup and you want to serve and you're holding it in your hand, you have your mind to put it back, etc. But you put the lid back on before you put it back on the blech. I believe that's how I was brought up. Meanwhile, Reb Chaim Noah says the oilam is loy nagol zoher, that the general people are not particular when they lift off the lid of the cholent Shabbos morning to check if you need to add water or perhaps to remove some, once you take out some cholent Shabbos morning. They're not particular not to cover it back. Yesh loima, because Shabbos morning, by then the pot has calmed down. It's not bubbling anymore, And therefore, by putting back the lid, you're not going to cause the water to start rising. You're not going to cause activity by putting on the, you're going to contain the heat, that yes, but you're not going to cause circulation by putting back the lid. So this is what Reb Chaim Noah says, his observation of the general min. And he goes, well, I obviously skipped out parts of his entry here, but then he says, when it's not fully cooked, absolutely it's absolutely a problem. But if it's fully cooked, sorach iyun, whether you can compare reverting the lid to stirring, even though through putting the lid on, the things at the bottom do go up, but we don't. He said we don't fully understand what the effect of stirring is. Perhaps the issue is only mamish stirring with your hand. And he says, with all due respect to the Shvisas HaShabbos, why do any other poskim not mention this, that even a fully cooked pot, you mustn't put the lid back on, which is a very common thing. And now that I'm thinking about it, if putting back the lid is a problem, how does it help if you put the lid back on when it's away from the blech, and then you put it back on? The effect is going to still happen 5 seconds later. If it is the effect is a problem, unless you say it's just a maras ayin effect. At any rate, so Chaim Noah is taking a lenient view about this, and Rav Forkash soll sein gesund in Shabbos Halocho is completely matir if it's fully cooked. I just want to throw something in that I once came to Manchester for a Shabbos, and the bocher who was in charge of the kitchen for Shabbos realized half an hour before Shabbos that the soup was still sitting in the freezer. So he whipped it out of the freezer and put it on the full fire and waited, and it came to the moment of lichtsinden, and then the extra 18 minutes, whatever it may be, 15 minutes, whatever it may be, and he lifts the lid and he sees that it's still ice floating on the top. So he turned off the fire and put the soup back in the freezer for next week. Unfortunately, I mean, had he known the halacha, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, in case this ever does happen, you should know like this. If there is a blech, he could have left, providing that there's a blech, he could have left the soup to warm up and to defrost and to warm up. Perhaps 2 hours later, it would have been hot. It's not a good idea to do this. We don't plan it that way. When we normally make sure that all the food is hot at the onset of Shabbos. In the scenario which I just described, if this bocher had half an hour into Shabbos lifted the lid, he wouldn't be allowed to put it back, because there it's cold, it's not fully boiled, and so putting back the lid is going to make it cook. That's not allowed. But he could have left it, kind of left the lid on, left it on full fire with a blech, gone away for 2 hours and come back. Probably by then it would have been fully boiled, and the bocherim would have been able to enjoy a hot soup that Friday night. Let's move on. So here we have question. All right. So question 4 on your list is: does a Jewish woman married out, Rachmana litzlan, does she need to cover her hair? So I'll tell you what happened over here. There's a couple on shlichus somewhere in Asia, in a Muslim country, and they're doing a challah bake. And so in anticipation of the this challah bake event, 20 women are coming, as Hashem, and so she was going to order that each woman will have a tichel, will have to cover her hair whilst they're doing this challah bake. A Yiddish thing, that's a Yiddish behavior. So her husband, the shliach, says to her, do you realize that 18 out of the 20 are married to non-Jews? It's all very nice, they're Jewish, but do they have a chiyuv to cover their hair? That you're going to this thing. So actually, it's not such a clear-cut answer. And if you have in the notes a reference to Oitzer HaPoskim in Even Ezer Simchov Aleph Oiz Chavav, What I can tell you, and what I told her, is that we have had in the community women who are Baalis Tshuva, and they had children from previous relationships, and they were encouraged to cover their hair. So again, there is a question whether the mitzvah or the chiyuv to cover the hair of a married woman, is it because she's not in a basula, or is it because she is married kahalocha? And that's the question here. She's not married kahalocha, so does she have to cover her hair? So we do encourage Baalis Tshuva who have been married before, especially if they have children, that they should cover their hair. Is it an absolute chiyuv? That's debatable. I felt, though, still it was advisable in this case that they should provide them with tichalach. Number one, it's going to be encouraging for the two which are married Jewish. And number two, all of these the 18, their daughters are Jewish. And where their daughters will get married, the mother will be able to tell them that that's what she knows, that the derech for a Jewish woman is to cover her hair. So that's why I advised, not as a chiyuv, but as a recommended practice. I didn't copy the Oitza HaPoskim is not on the Oitza HaChochma, so that's why you don't have a copy of the page on the screen. We're going on to the next question, and that is about a couple. So the shliach somewhere in the United States, and he's got a couple who've been married for 50 years, Baruch Hashem. They back in Russia, and now they're living somewhere in the United States, and they want to get married. And so he's asking some guidance for the chasana, and he asks, what do you write in the Kesuba? Now, there's a difference between the Kesuba of a first marriage or a second marriage. If there's a Psula, the Kesuba is Masayim, it's 200 zuz, and for one's been married before them, it's 100 zuz. So some changes there. So what you have in front of you is from the series of Mishpat HaKesuba, written by Rebbe Eliyahu Baal Shalom, his son-in-law of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who's written an 8-volume series on Kesubas. So miraculously, I managed to find this in the 8 volumes. And he writes the following, miraculously, as in by doing a search. So he writes like this: also a couple who are coming to get married, Kedas Moshe Yisrael, although they've been living before a married life, a civil marriage, etc. One should come. So they're coming here. They've been married, and she was never married to anyone else, and they want to now have a kosher marriage. So you can write. He says he recommends to write Moiha Besulaichi Mosa, to write the Kesuba of 200 zuz. And Sfardim don't write Midiraisa. We write Midiraisa. He says you can also, and then you can commit yourself. The chosen is allowed to commit himself. The Chazilichi Midiraisa. You can make that commitment. The only change is that in the Kesuba we write, we refer to the Kala Basul Todor, this Basula. And obviously that title cannot be used over here. She's Baruch Hashem, her children are there applauding. You can't really write Basul Todor, but you can, everything else you write the same. All right, so that's Baruch Hashem, it's a thing which is happening. People are going second, people were married before in former Soviet Union, etc., and coming to having a kosher chuppah. So here I got a very interesting question. This is next question. I get an email about a fellow traveling from LA on the 5th of March, which is Atanas Esther. They're going to land in London on the 5th of March, and they're going to then take a flight from Heathrow to Tel Aviv. So he's asking, when does the fast begin? When does the fast end? So again, I'm sharing useful information. There is a website called My Zmanim, and there you can also get, if you type in your flight details or your flight times, they will give you exactly for your itinerary when will be time for Shacharis, when will be time for Mincha. They will give you the details of when to daven, etc. during your journey. So I shared that with them when the fast was. It was 4 hours after the takeoff into Los Angeles, will be already the beginning of the fast. Then I said, wait a minute, what about Megillah? So the person on the other side says that this person is traveling to Yerusholayim. So again, if they're traveling on Tanis Esther and traveling that night into to Eretz Yisrael, they're traveling on Purim night. So what about Megillah by night, by day? I think they're traveling with a Megillah. He says, no, they're going to Yerushalayim. So here's the question: Does someone who is traveling from Chutz La'aretz, as intending to spend Tesvav, the 15th of Adar, in Yerushalayim, do they have to hear Megillah on the 14th? That's the question. So I looked around a bit, and I came across this. The Aruch HaShulchan, Simon Tofresh Peches Sifte Zayin. So the Ramah does say that even if you are of origin from a city, a walled city, when normally you'd lay in the Megillah on the 15th, but if you are in the desert or you are on a boat, so then you will lay in the Megillah on the 14th. So again, a person from Yerushalayim who is on a cruise, so then he will learn Megillah like Rov of Anash on the 14th. So let's read this carefully. Koloimar, the ben krach shehoye b'midbar or b'sfina. So you are from a town which is a walled city. They would lane on the 15th, but you are now en route. So then don't read on the 15th, because imagine if you'd been in town. You'd been in a town somewhere in Chutz La'aretz, you'd have to do a Megillah on the 14th. And therefore, the fact you're on a boat is as if you had no difference if you'd be in town. And in town means in a town which doesn't have a wall, like a Rov of Anash. Then he says the following, he says this interesting chiddush. This is his own chiddush. If he intends, his plan is that by the 15th he's going to be home, let's say in Yerushalayim, then he doesn't have to read Megillah on the 14th. Bishleim, all very well if he's in a town on the 14th, then he is bound to follow the practice of the local people. But if he is en route in the sea or in the desert, he doesn't have a shiur automatically. If he's going to stay there also, he's planning to stay there for the 14th and the 15th, then he has to follow Rov of Anash and hear the Megillah, read the Megillah on the 14th. But here, since he's planning to be on the 15th, so they are in Yerushalayim, then he doesn't have to learn the Megillah on the 14th. So that I find very interesting. So here's the question, which I don't have the answer. What would happen if they land in Tel Aviv Airport, Ben Gurion, if they land before Alos HaShachar, and then they come into Purim morning? Is that called, is landed in the ear? Is the airport counted as the ear, or possibly not? It's not really a place where people stay. It's people just coming and going. Perhaps you can say that we can rely on that. And again, he's going to come to you straight from the airport to Yerushalayim. All right, we can rely on that upon him. Yeah, let's move on. So one of our listeners is asking a question: why is it that we have a minhag Chabad to spit when we say why don't we spit at when we mention the same word elilim in hoidu? So let's read one thing at a time. So this is from the Hayom Yom for Test Tavers. It's customary when reciting Aleinu, when we say that phrase, that they bow down to vain and emptiness, and also Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, we say the same Lashon, whereas in Nusach Ashkenaz it's Mishtachim El Lo Yoshia. So we Madaikim Shaloi Mispalalim, we don't use the word Mispalalim, because I think there's a sensitivity not to use that word Tefiloh. It's interesting, the connection to the beginning of the shiur, not to use that in the context of Avodah Zarah. Tefiloh means to connect and we don't want to use that in the context of Avodah Zarah. Kol ponim, and there's a minig. So this, first of all, he says about the nusach. Second point he says is that there's a minig to spit after saying those words. The reason for the spitting, which by the way is mentioned in the Taz, which is probably about 350, 400 years ago. Although even from Christ, you don't see it so much. Lubavitch are very mahader. Rebbe would sometimes make his comment, Rebbe Katznelberg, and that he spat so much, enough for 3 chalitzas. But never mind. Ta'amarakika, the reason for this is because from speaking that creates saliva, and we don't want to benefit from the saliva which was used for mention of Avodah Zarah. We don't want to use that for further praise for Hashem. Before I go further, sometimes people ask, what do you do in middle of Shemona Esrei on Rosh Hashanah? I would suggest you have a tissue with you, and when you say those words, instead of spitting to the side in the middle of Shemona Esrei, which may not be appropriate, for you to tell you why, well, just absorb it in a tissue. So now comes the question, if there is this opinion of not using the saliva from mention of Avodah Zarah, why not do the same in Hoidu? Now, what you have over here on the top part of the screen is from the Sefer, the Sidur Arizal. This is the 4th print of the Sidur Arizal, called Sidur Reb Yankiv Koppel or Kol Yaakov. And he does say here that it talks about the pause in this posuk, Kikol Lilim, pause, and then he says, V'yoroik lignai hasiter achra. Then you should spit. You should pause and spit. And then you say Vashem Shemaim also. That's what the Sidur Arizal perhaps should emphasize. That does not mean that this is from the Arizal. It's the compiler puts this in, but I don't know whether we have any Messiah from the Arizal on this detail. I don't know. But meanwhile, this very question was asked to the Rebbe, and this was a Yid from South America who went to Yechidus, and Beryl Baumgarten al Sholem went in with him to be able to translate, to interpret from between Yiddish and Spanish. And so this person had asked the Rebbe, why don't we spit at Hoidu as we do in Aleinu? And the Rebbe's answer was that in middle of a posuk, it's not appropriate to spit. And this I heard from Rabbi Luz Olzeingesund. Okay, let's move on. So one of our listeners asked me this question, if there's a leak, are you allowed to place a bowl under a leak on Shabbos to collect the water? So let's read this halacha carefully. It's in Simin, in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, in Simin Shin Lamed Ches. There's a word here, delaf or delef, in contemporary Hebrew. You are allowed to put a keli, a container, under a drip on Shabbos. And if it's filled, then you are allowed to pour it away and then take it or pour it out and then bring it back and put it to collect the further drips. And then he said that's only if the drippings might be something else in English, but meanwhile, if it is fit for bathing, for washing, alcohol. May not be drinking quality, but if it's good for washing. But if it's ein roy leklum, but if that which is dripping is not fit for any purpose, then it's muksa. Now here we have, since something is muksa, also litain kli tachtov. You wouldn't be allowed to put a dish under something that is muksa. For want of a better word, you mustn't muksify things on Shabbos. There was something which was portable, was mobile, and you, by putting it to contain muksa, you're making it muksa. You're not allowed to make something muksa on Shabbos. So if the drip is from I didn't want to put it on the sheet, but if it's, let's say, from a toilet or sewer, and it's drip, that kind of stuff which is dripping, that stuff is muksa. And so therefore to put a dish underneath would be, he says, no, it wouldn't be allowed. If you did, so then you would be allowed to take away the repulsive contents. You're allowed to take it away. If it's a place where you're there, you're nearby, it's offensive to you. And we have this famous halacha that gerev shel rei or graf shel rei, that something which is offensive, even though it's muksa, you are allowed to take it away, because kavod habrios, because respect for human life overrides the din of muksa. So if there is something repulsive, offensive, where you are b'mokim yeshivosoi, then you are allowed to take away the offensive substance. And yet, this is very interesting. Afal pikein, you wouldn't be allowed to put the dish lechatchila under the leek, al samach, that later you'll take it away and pour it out, and it's not going to be batal be'echona because you'll be allowed to move it because of it's offensive. So he says, "Shelo yitira begerev shel rei ela b'di'evet." Al-chatchila also lasts as gerev shel rei ela b'mokim hefsid. So here we have a little bit of a leeway, but he's saying to chatchila to put our bowl under something which is going to be repulsive would not be allowed because you're making it muksa. The fact that despite muksa you're allowed to take it away, that's a separate inyan. But meanwhile, you're making it muksa. Unless there's a loss involved. There's a loss involved, then you'd be allowed to. So then that's something which perhaps would be open for a bit of interpretation. If the situation is there's a loss involved, then you'd be allowed to. It may also be, if it's a room which is which people are using, so then again it's going to be offensive. If that's the the facilities in the house, it's offensive to people to have to use that room with the leakage. So then possibly there would be a heter to put it there. Again, it's a violation of din of muksa. It's a violation, however, in order to preserve the dignity of human life, and therefore there would be a heter to do so. Let's move on. Another question from the same questioner: davening while under the influence. Sometimes a fabring, and sometimes people take a little bit more than a little bit. And are you allowed to daven? It's actually quite interesting. So this is Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Siman Tzadik Tes. If you had a revius of wine in one shot, so you shouldn't daven until the effect of the wine has worn off. And this is very, very important. Even though by waiting until the wine comes off is going to be, you're going to miss Tefiloh, that you shouldn't daven whilst you are under the influence. The im shosa yoser, if you had more than a revius, so then the guidance here is, if you're able to talk before a king, you're not called a shikir. It's called, there's a level called shosui, tipsy, and then there's drunk, 2 levels. So if a person, he seems to be saying like this, a person who's shosui also shouldn't daven. However, if he did daven, he doesn't have to daven again. The Tefiloh is Tefiloh. Im ovar v'hispalo. And he doesn't have to daven again once he sobers up. Even though it's still the Zman Tefiloh. If a person is so stoned that he is not able to talk before a melech, that's the level called shikir. And then, even if he davened, his davening is considered an abomination, says etc. So this is it was a little surprise to me that he's saying here that if a person is tipsy, they shouldn't be davening, even if it's going to mean missing Zman Tefiloh. And that could be in winter or Shabbos afternoon. It could be quite a narrow window. But I guess it means better to close your eyes for a few minutes and sober up a bit, and then daven afterwards. So thank you for that. We're going to go on to the next point, and that is, if someone is at a chasna, as you know, there's a famous letter of the Rebbe about whether you have to wait when you go to a wedding. Do you have to wait till benching, or because you have a chiyuv shel etc., or can you bench on your own? The letter of the Rebbe is written to the Cheshin of a Rebbe. There was a Cheshin of a Rebbe who would send shilas to all different rabbonim. So you can see the same question is in Minchas Yitzchok, etc. So he also wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe does kind of melamed zchus on those who bench without waiting for the full benching with the Sheva Brochus, etc. So here's the question: you're part of you answered Mizuman with 3 men, and then now there's, let's say it's not a chasna, whatever it may be. Now there's 10 people, and they want to bench, and they're asking, "Can you join?" And you say, "But I've already answered Zimun." So can you answer Zimun if you've already answered Zimun at that same meal? So let's read what we have over here. Here we have in Siman Kuf Tzadik Dalet. If you have 10 people and 3 of them had benched without Zimun, so then they could join, even after they finished benching, they could join a Zimun. That's only if they benched without Zimun. But if 3 had made a Zimun, then they cannot combine to make up the Zimun for another 7 to make up a Zimun of 10. So again, if you bench on your own without Zimun, then you are able to combine to a Zimun after your benching. If you joined a Zimun, a small Zimun, then you wouldn't be allowed to. Right, so now we have here, someone is pointing out that a revius of ordinary wine doesn't make most people tipsy. Probably true, and that's why the oilam is mekel. And yeah, on Simchas Torah by Musaf, it is often that someone who is a little over the top davening. That is also true. And I don't know, the only thing I can say, perhaps it's irresponsible, but perhaps there's a special Shulchan Aruch for Simchas Torah. There's certain things which we do on Simchas Torah which are different, like aliyahs, etc. So perhaps there's some leeway on that. I have actually 2 more things which I want to share with you. They came into the list after the list was sent out on Thursday night, and so I'm going to share those with you. Number 1, someone asked me about trying on a garment. He bought a garment and is going to give it into, he wants to check whether it fits. He wants to he wants to check that it fits, and then if it fits, then he'll give it in for checking for sharpness. So is there justification to try it on with the doubt whether there is sharpness? So here we have from Siman Shin Aleph, that's in Yerodea, that's the dinim of sharpness. And there is a din in Mishnah talking about a tailor sitting and sewing garments, and he's sitting there, the garments are on his lap. So he's doing tailoring for a goy, so he's tailoring sharpness. So he's got sharpness on his lap. That's okay, because he's not wearing it as a garment. He's not doing it for the benefit of clothing. There's a chumrah, a tznuin would put it on they wouldn't put it on their lap, they put it on the floor, or I guess on the table, whatever. They also talks about people who are selling clothes, so they're selling sharpness. So they would be wearing it perhaps over their shoulder, but because they're not doing it for wearing. But then the people who are more tznuim, which means more machmir, they would not put it over their shoulder, they would wear it or have a stick and have the sharpness garments on the stick. Then there are more ads here. Some permit even wearing sharpness if you're not wearing it for your personal benefit. Let's say it is if you got to do with going through customs, which you'd have to, if it was a purchased garment, then you start being charged. And if you wear it, you wouldn't have to pay customs duties. Or you're wearing it in order to show the size because you want to sell it. So here you've got a vendor, he's selling clothes. So the Ramah says it's shatnez. He's allowed to wear it just to show the size. So here's the question: why does the Ramah say if you want to sell it? Why doesn't he say to check out because you want to buy it? Is that a diuk here? Only the vendor is allowed to wear it for size, or not the buyer. So here we've got this specialist sefer called Malbusha Yesha from Rav Shaya Beloy, where he writes that one who wants to buy a garment and wants to put it on to see whether it fits, Some say that l'kul be'alma you're not allowed. If it was definitely shatnez, you wouldn't be allowed to put it on for size. Now, in the notes, he talks about if you're not sure. So then you have here, because it refers to, I looked up just the one, Cheshiva Ephod from Rav Padva. And he goes into a whole discussion about this, because this comes from the Chaya Odom, Chochmas Odom rather. He says, if you're buying, you're not allowed to try on a garment which is shatnez, because that's considered inevitably you're benefiting. Rav Padva is not so convinced, and the ikar that you have a combination. It could be that it's not even shatnez. Even if it is, it could be that the halacha is that you're just wearing it just for size is not considered a benefit. So therefore, and I believe that is minhag ha'olam, that people go to goyish shop to buy a garment, they will try it on and then later give it in for shatnez. So there is basis for that. Right. The last thing which I want to share with you is I got a call on Friday, and this was a member of Anash who's a Kohen, and he went to Leider to a shiva, a Sfardish shiva, and by Birchas Kohen, by Chazoras Hashels, he came to Birchas Kohenim. So he's asking, what should he have done? Should he have joined? Because by the Sfardim, they do Birchas Kohenim every day. So he went out. If you're there, if your Kohen is there in the room, and someone says Kohanim, you have a chiyuv to go up, whatever. The point depends if you start moving by Ritzei, all right, fine. But meanwhile, what I told him is that you could have joined them and given Birchas Kohanim. I know Ashkenazim don't do that, and especially the Beis Oval. I may remind you that just around Tisha B'Av, there was that Ksav Yad of the Rebbe, which was published about the whether to say or not to say Birchas Kohanim Chazoras Hashatz Elikeinu v'Elokei Aviseinu on Tisha B'Av morning. But meanwhile, let's kind of keep to our point about. So here we have in the Piskei Tshuvos in Simkuf Chof Ches, he writes the following. He brings from River Ephraim, Ben Yisrael, Etzisrodik, who's the Chutz Loretz and the Sephardish Minyan. So he joins with them. Then he writes Rav Shalom Shvadron, the Magid from Yerusholayim. When he was a Chutz Loretz, he would go every day, because in Yerusholayim he would do Duchen every day. So he would make his point of wherever he was a Chutz Loretz to go to a Sephardish shul in order to do the mitzvah Tzis Kapayim, to do Duchening as he would do in Yerusholayim. People who live in Chutz Loretz, so Reb Shlomo Zalman says, you don't have to go. You shouldn't be going to Sephardish shul in order to do Birchas Kohanim. Keep to your minhag. But if you happen to be in Sephardish shul, you can follow their minhag. Now, this brought to my mind the conversation which the Rebbe had with Reb Shar Yosef Kohen. So Reb Shar Yosef Kohen was the Rav Roshi of Haifa, and he had a relationship with the Rebbe back from the Lita, from Gluboke, where the Rebbe had stayed in their house as a young man. And the Rebbe says to him, do you do Birchas Kohanim, I guess in Haifa, every day, or only Shabbos? So he says, every day. So the Rebbe says, what are you doing over here? How are you doing over here? I'm told that there are Sephardish shuls where they do Birchas Kohanim every day. So Rav Kohen says to the Rebbe that the Sephardish shul is far away from where I'm staying. So the Rebbe said, B'chol ofen, when you get back to Eretz Yisrael, you should give Birchas Kohanim right away. And he says that, all right, this is the conversation. I suspect that what's going on here, the Rebbe told Rav Koyer of Shar Yosef to do Birchas Kohanim in a Sephardish shul. He didn't tell every Kohen who came from Eretz Yisrael. Possibly because Rav Shar Yosef, his meaning was to do it every day. And he was like, he also pushed that they should do in Haifa, they should do it every day. So perhaps he as a specific individual had a special need, and therefore the Rebbe was encouraging him to do Birchas Kohanim every day, because it's like when we saw about Rav Shvadron, he felt a special emphasis on do Birchas Kohanim every day. Doesn't mean that every Kohen who comes from Yerushalayim to Chutz Loretz to start looking for a Sephardish minyan, but I don't know. I'll leave that open as a question. You don't ask me the question in any case. So, all right, I wish you all a good Tavoch, and we should hear Besoides Toves, Yeshuas and Nechomis, Geula, Eliyahu Hanovi, forgive us Besoides Toves, Besuras Hagula, B'meheru Yameinu, Mamish.